You're an embarrassment to this family." My sister's words cut through me like ice. Madison stood there in her silk blouse looking at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her designer shoe. Behind her, my brother Connor held out a check $2,000 to make me disappear before her fancy wedding. They couldn't have their rich in-laws knowing their sister worked at a roadside diner. What they didn't know was that I'd spent 3 years undercover, hunting human traffickers while they sipped champagne. And the truth was about to explode. My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 42 years old, and 3 years ago, my family threw me away like yesterday's newspaper. That Sunday afternoon still burns in my chest, a wound that refuses to heal properly. We had gathered at Madison's townhouse. She loved calling it her pre-wedding headquarters ever since she got engaged to Jackson. Jackson came from the kind of money where his monthly allowance could buy a small car. His family owned half the commercial real estate in 3 counties, and Madison glowed whenever she mentioned it. I remember every detail of that day. The way the afternoon sun slanted through her kitchen windows. The smell of my homemade lasagna. I'd spent hours on it using Mom's old recipe, the one Madison used to beg for when we were kids. I stood there in my worn jeans and faded denim jacket, probably smelling like the diner's fryer oil mixed with highway dust. Madison wore pearls that caught the light. Her manicured nails painted the exact shade of pink as her lipstick. When I set that casserole dish on her granite counter, she looked at it the way you'd look at a stray dog that wandered too close, with a mixture of pity and disgust. She didn't say hello, didn't even pretend to smile, just crossed her arms and delivered the words that would echo in my head for years. "Naomi, we need to have a serious conversation." I felt it coming, the way you feel a storm before the first drops hit. My whole body tensed, but I kept my face neutral. I'd learned that skill in places far more dangerous than my sister's kitchen. She started with how formal the wedding would be. How Jackson's family had certain expectations, traditional values, high standards. Then she said it the phrase that still wakes me up some nights. "I just can't have them thinking we come from that kind of background." That kind of background. She meant me. The sister who wore discount store clothes and drove a 15-year-old pickup truck. The one who served coffee and pie to truckers at a highway diner. The one whose hands were rough from work, whose apartment was in the wrong part of town. She delivered those words with the casual cruelty of someone who'd already made peace with cutting me out of her life. Connor stepped forward then, my older brother who'd gone to law school and never let anyone forget it. He already had the check written out. $2,000 made out to me like I was a charity case. "Use this to get back on your feet," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Maybe take some online classes, learn a skill that pays better." "But Naomi..." He paused, making sure I understood. "Don't contact us until things look different for you. Until you've made something of yourself. No screaming. No dramatic confrontation. Just cold surgical removal, like cutting out a tumor before it could spread to the healthy tissue of their perfect lives." They looked at me not with anger but with embarrassment. Like I was proof that their family wasn't as flawless as they pretended. I didn't fight. Didn't argue. I just nodded, left the lasagna on the counter. They probably threw it out the moment I left and walked out of that house. The door clicked shut behind me with a finality that said everything. For 3 years after that day, I was dead to them. No birthday cards, no holiday invitations, not even a text to check if I was still breathing. I became the sister they used to have, the cautionary tale they probably told at dinner parties. "Poor Naomi," they'd say, shaking their heads. "Some people just can't rise above their circumstances." And for a while, in the darkest moments, I almost believed them. Almost believed I was exactly what they saw: a failure, a disappointment, someone who'd peaked in high school and tumbled downward ever since. But they didn't know the truth. They couldn't know the truth. That diner where I worked? It wasn't just any roadside restaurant. It was a carefully selected observation post for one of the most dangerous undercover operations the Department of Defense had authorized in a decade. For 3 years, I wasn't Naomi the waitress. I was Captain Naomi Carter, United States Army Intelligence, living a fabricated life to hunt monsters who trafficked human beings like cargo. My assignment came through classified channels that most people don't even know exist. A joint task force between Army Intelligence, FBI, and local law enforcement had identified a sophisticated trafficking network operating along the interstate highways. They needed someone who could blend in, someone trained in deep cover operations, someone who could live a lie so convincingly that even their own family would believe it. That someone was me. Every morning, I'd tie on that stained apron and pour coffee for truckers, some of whom were smuggling children in hidden compartments. I memorized license plates while refilling sugar dispensers. I recorded conversations while wiping down tables. The wire I wore was so small it looked like a button on my uniform. The gun strapped to my ankle was light enough that I could work 12-hour shifts without limping. I served pancakes to men who'd sold teenagers to the highest bidder, and I smiled at them like they were regular customers. I laughed at their jokes while memorizing the tattoos that marked them as part of the syndicate. Once, a trafficker grabbed my wrist when I served his coffee, his fingers digging in hard enough to leave bruises. I had to stand there, had to keep that waitress smile plastered on my face. When every instinct screamed at me to break his arm in 3 places moves I'd perfected during combat training. The mental toll was crushing. There were nights I'd get home to my deliberately shabby apartment and vomit from the stress of maintaining my cover. Nights I'd sit on my bathroom floor, holding my service weapon, reminding myself why I couldn't use it yet. We were building a case that would save dozens of lives, but it meant letting monsters walk free while we gathered evidence. I thought about calling Madison so many times, especially on the bad nights when I'd had to watch a suspicious truck pull away, knowing there might be victims inside but unable to break cover to save them. 2 tours in Afghanistan where I'd run intelligence operations in active combat zones. A deployment to Eastern Europe during rising tensions, where I'd coordinated with NATO intelligence services. The Bronze Star with Valor device came from an ambush outside Kandahar, where I'd dragged 2 wounded soldiers to safety while under fire, then provided covering fire for the medics. My left shoulder still aches when it rains shrapnel they couldn't remove without risking nerve damage. I held a security clearance that required yearly polygraph tests and psychological evaluations. I'd been trained in 4 languages, though I was only fluent in 2. I could build a surveillance network from scratch, read satellite imagery like a map, and construct psychological profiles of targets that were accurate enough to predict their breakfast choices. During those 3 years undercover, I mapped out the entire trafficking network. Every connection, every safe house, every corrupt official who looked the other way. I identified the money launderers, the document forgers, the truck drivers who thought they were just making extra cash and didn't ask questions about their cargo. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday night. A trafficker I'd been serving coffee to for 18 months finally trusted me enough to hint at a major shipment coming through. 12 teenagers from runaway shelters across 3 states, gathered up like stray cats headed for buyers overseas. That was our trigger. Within 6 hours, 17 coordinated raids happened simultaneously across 4 states. I was working my shift when it went down. Had to act surprised when the FBI agents stormed in. Had to let them arrest me along with everyone else to maintain cover until the very last second. It wasn't until I was in the back of a patrol car that I finally showed my real ID to the agent beside me. The look on his face when he realized the waitress he'd just cuffed was actually a decorated army captain, I'll never forget it. 43 victims recovered, 12 of them minors. The youngest was 11 years old. After the debriefs, the classified reports, the commendations that would never be public, I was granted 6 months' leave. My commanding officer, a general who'd seen combat in 3 wars, shook my hand and said 5 words. "You did good, Captain Carter." That's when I saw the message about Madison's wedding. It appeared on my phone while I was standing in line at a pharmacy in DC, still adjusting to being myself again after 3 years of being someone else. Connor had accidentally included me in a group message with all the wedding details, the country club venue, the time, even parking instructions. It was clearly meant for other family members, not for the sister they'd banished. For a long moment, I stood frozen between the cold medicine and the magazines, reading that message over and over. The logical part of my brain said to ignore it. They'd made their choice 3 years ago. They didn't want me then. Why would they want me now? But something deeper stirred. Not revenge, exactly. Not even anger anymore. It was more like completion, like a circle that needed closing. For my entire life, I'd been the Carter child who didn't quite fit. Madison with her pageant crowns and honor roll certificates. Connor with his debate trophies and law school acceptance letters. And me, the one who joined ROTC instead of cheerleading, who could field strip a rifle faster than I could apply mascara. Even after I commissioned, even after my deployments, there was always this undercurrent in every family gathering. Like they were humoring me. Like military service was something people did when they couldn't do anything better. Madison once introduced me at a party as my sister who's in the army. She's trying to figure out what to do with her life. The wedding invitation, accidental as it was, felt like a chance to finally show them. Not the manufactured version they'd created in their minds, but the real me. The one who'd spent 3 years in hell to save children they'd never meet. The one who'd earned commendations they couldn't even pronounce. So I made my decision. I would go to that wedding. Not to cause a scene, not to ruin Madison's day, but to finally stand in my truth. They deserved to know who they'd thrown away. I went to my closet and pulled out my army dress uniform. Class A's, they call them. The jacket was pristine, stored properly with cedar blocks to keep it perfect. I laid each piece out on my bed methodically. The jacket with its captain's bars that I'd earned through blood and dedication. The ribbon rack that told the story of my service, each one representing months or years of sacrifice. The bronze star that still made my shoulder ache. The combat patches that marked me as someone who'd seen real danger, not the kind you watch on TV. As I dressed that morning, each piece of the uniform felt like armor, not against bullets this time, but against the judgment of people who should have loved me regardless. The country club hadn't changed much. Same white columns trying to look older than they were. Same manicured lawns that probably cost more to maintain than I made in a year at the diner. Valet attendants in red vests scrambled to park luxury cars while guests in pastel dresses. And light suits milled about like extras in a movie about beautiful people with beautiful problems. I parked my black SUV myself away from the valet stand. When I stepped out, my dress shoes, not boots. Never boots with the dress uniform, clicked against the pavement with military precision. The spring sun caught my captain's bars, making them gleam. A security guard at the entrance straightened unconsciously when he saw me, his hand moving to his temple in an almost salute before he caught himself. "Ma'am," he said, with the kind of respect that comes automatically when you see certain uniforms. He didn't ask for an invitation. Didn't need to. Some things transcend wedding guest lists. Inside, the lobby smelled like expensive flowers and even more expensive perfume. Piano music drifted from the courtyard where the ceremony was already beginning. I walked slowly, deliberately, my shoulders back and head high. Not aggressively, not trying to make a scene, but not shrinking either. For once in my life, I was taking up exactly as much space as I deserved. The ceremony doors were propped open. Rows of white chairs filled with people I vaguely recognized, cousins, family friends, Madison's sorority sisters who still traveled in a pack. The altar was draped in white roses and baby's breath. And there was Madison in a dress that probably cost more than the down payment on most people's houses. She was radiant, holding Jackson's hands, repeating vows about love and honesty and commitment. Connor stood as a groomsman, his smile wide and proud, like he'd personally arranged this union. None of them saw me slip into the last row, behind a cluster of elderly relatives discussing their recent cruise. I sat there in my uniform, watching my family celebrate without me. The medals on my chest caught the light when I breathed. The Bronze Star, the Army Commendation Medals, the Afghanistan Campaign Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, each one a chapter of a story they'd never bothered to read. There was something surreal about the moment. 3 years ago, I'd left their world in shame. Now I sat among them, invisible still, but carrying proof of who I really was. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 3 years successfully pretending to be nobody, and now I was finally ready to stop pretending. When the ceremony ended and people moved toward the reception hall, I stood with them, moving with the crowd but apart from it. I found myself at the bar ordering a club soda when I heard my name. Not spoken to me, but about me. A woman in navy blue was telling her companion about Madison's sister, the one who works at that awful diner off the highway. Her friend, clutching a champagne flute, made a sympathetic noise. "Some people just can't pull themselves together," she said. It must be so embarrassing for Madison, especially today. They were 3 feet away from me, close enough that I could see the judgment in their eyes, the casual cruelty of people who'd never struggled for anything real in their lives. I set down my glass and turned to face them. "Excuse me," I said, my voice calm and clear. "I believe you're discussing Madison's sister." They turned, polite smiles fixed in place, probably assuming I was venue staff or someone's military guest. "I'm Naomi Carter," I said, watching their expressions shift. "I'm Madison's sister." The silence that followed was beautiful in its completeness. The woman in navy blue blinked rapidly, her mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. Her friend's champagne glass trembled slightly. One of the men in their group, probably someone's husband, found his voice first. "You're military?" His eyes tracked across my uniform, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "I'm a captain in the United States Army," I said, letting each word land with its full weight. "Intelligence Division. For the past 3 years, I've been working undercover as part of a joint federal task force targeting human trafficking operations." Someone's glass hit the floor. The sound of breaking crystal cut through the reception noise, drawing more attention our way. I pulled out my military ID, holding it so they could see the photo, the rank, the official seals that marked it as real. Last month, our operation resulted in 17 arrests across 4 states. We recovered 43 victims, including 12 children who'd been reported missing. The crowd around us was growing now. I could see Connor pushing through, his face flushed, his eyes wide. Madison was behind him, one hand pressed to her chest, her wedding dress rustling as she moved. "The diner you mentioned," I continued, my voice carrying now, "was my cover. Every shift I worked, every coffee I poured, every table I cleaned was part of a 3-year intelligence operation that saved lives." Connor reached me first. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Madison stood beside him, her face pale beneath her wedding makeup, her perfect composure finally cracking. "Naomi?" Madison's voice was barely a whisper. Are you really?" "Yes," I said simply. "This is who I really am, who I've always been, even when you couldn't see it." They pulled me aside after that, away from the growing crowd of guests, who suddenly had something more interesting to discuss than the flower arrangements. We ended up in a quiet corner near the outdoor fountain, the sound of water providing cover for a conversation 3 years overdue. Madison was trembling slightly, her hands clutching at her dress. Connor had his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his law school confidence completely evaporated. "Why?" Madison's voice cracked on the single word. "Why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us think? God, Naomi, why did you let us believe you were?" "A failure," I supplied, my voice gentle but firm. "An embarrassment? Someone who didn't belong at your wedding because of that kind of background?" She flinched at her own words thrown back at her. "I couldn't tell you," I said. Operational security meant absolute silence. I couldn't risk the mission or the lives that depended on it, not even to defend myself to my own family. Connor finally found his voice. "But after, when it was over, you could have called, could have explained." "Could I?" I asked. "After you handed me that check like I was a charity case? After you told me not to contact you until I'd made something of myself? Tell me, Connor, what would you have said if I'd called you up and claimed I was actually an undercover intelligence officer? Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I'd finally lost it completely?" The truth of that hung between us like a weight. We all knew the answer. But more than that, I continued, I realized something during those 3 years. You didn't push me away because of what I was doing. You pushed me away because of what you needed me not to be. Someone who reminded you that success doesn't always look like country clubs and trust funds. Someone whose existence suggested that maybe your values weren't the only ones that mattered. Madison was crying now, careful tears that didn't smudge her expensive makeup. "We were wrong," she whispered. "God, Naomi, we were so wrong." Connor nodded, his voice rough. "There's no excuse for what we did, for what we said. We're sorry. More sorry than you can know." I looked at them both, my siblings who'd shared my childhood but never really known me. The apology was real, I could see that. But apologies don't erase years of silence. They don't undo the nights I'd wanted to call them after seeing something horrible, only to remember they'd made it clear I wasn't welcome in their lives. "I'm not angry anymore," I said finally. The anger burned out somewhere between year 2 and year 3 of the operation. "But I want you to understand something. I didn't come here for revenge or to ruin your wedding, Madison. I came because I finally realized I don't need your approval. I don't need you to understand my choices or validate my path." I paused, letting that sink in. "I've saved lives. I've stood in danger most people can't imagine. I've earned commendations that will never be public, but mean everything to the people who understand what they represent. I became someone I'm proud to be, with or without your acceptance. But," I added, seeing the devastation in their faces, "if you want to try again, not picking up where we left off, but starting fresh from who we all are now, I'm willing to consider it. Slowly, carefully, with the understanding that trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild." Madison reached for my hand, tentatively, like she was afraid I'd pull away. "We want that," she said. more than anything. Connor nodded. Whatever it takes. However long it takes. I squeezed Madison's hand once, then let go. Then we'll see, I said. But right now you have a wedding to get back to. Guests to entertain. A life to celebrate. I left as the band started playing for the first dance. No dramatic exit, no final words for effect. I simply walked back through the lobby, past the security guard who nodded respectfully, and out into the evening air. The spring breeze was cool against my skin as I stood in the parking lot for a moment, looking up at the stars just beginning to appear. 3 years ago, I'd left a family dinner as someone they pitied. Tonight, I left as someone they'd finally seen. My phone buzzed a message from Connor. Please don't disappear again. I thought about responding, then decided to wait. They'd waited 3 years to know me. They could wait a little longer for my answer. As I drove away from the country club, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me wore captain's bars and a bronze star. She had saved 43 lives and caught 17 criminals. She had survived 3 years of isolation to do what was right. She was not what her family had expected. She was something more. And for the first time in my life, that was exactly enough.